Hi, I'm Rhiannon Faith, and I'm here to tell you a story. So this is sort of summer fun, summer edition. I was thinking with the kids having just gotten out of school, all of the different ideas I have in my mind about things that they can be doing to keep themselves occupied and busy during the summer months. And again, in this state of nostalgia, I was thinking about what my summers used to look like as a kid. And some of those things, honestly, I wish were still an option for me in adulthood. So I just wanted to kind of like run down memory lane of the different things that we used to do when we were kids. So my sister and I are 3 years, 3 months apart. And then my brother and I are 20 years apart. Same parents. They just had a late addition to the party. So my brother and I did not grow up in the same house together. He did live in a house with me and my parents at one point when he was in like 6th grade, but he didn't grow up with me in the house. This is really more about what it looked like for my sister and I. And so there were a lot of really fun things we did. My mom was really the master of cool things for no cost. It was definitely out of necessity, but she brought lots of creative opportunities into our orbit, and we got to do lots of cool things that cost no money. And so, interestingly enough, not as many of those are readily available, or I don't know, maybe I'm just out of the loop about some of these things now, but there were some things that we did that were like money related or using money, and most of those honestly had more to do with our dad being involved. When my dad was involved, he wanted an experience. It was bougie all day long. But for my mom, it was really like, how do we do something that costs nothing? And so difference in the kind of experiences we would have. Of course, the Blue Angels were an every summer thing, and we would go to some VBS somewhere along the ways. I've talked about VBS experiences in summer camps, the church camps that I've gone to over the years. And then we would go a handful of years. There were resources for us to go to more of a fun day camp or a fun sleepover camp. We did I remember one with the YMCA, one with the Boys and Girls Club, where you'd go to the water park and then you'd go to a museum or, miniature golf, stuff like that, which was tons of fun, honestly. But those were way fewer and further between. But like our summer staples were the library. Like regardless of whatever else, no matter where we lived, between, Knoxville, Tennessee and San Diego County, we were always at the library in the summer, and we would do the summer reading program. And so, for every number of books you read, you got little prizes, and I'm super keen on getting gold stars, as I previously mentioned. So the little reward system, huge incentive for me. But we would sit in the library for hours. We would read there. We'd find new books. It was such a great time. And, adult me fully recognizes this was a cost-saving measure for my mom. If we were out of the house, then we were not using electricity at home, which would not increase our electric bill. And then, you're not really eating while you're in the library. So we're not like snackish and snacking through everything that is in the house. Not that we snacked like that when we were kids. It was weird snacks. Summer snacks were weird. I'll get to that. But we spent tons of time in the library and tons of time reading during the summer in particular. And so I would say we went to the library probably, I don't think it's an exaggeration, at least twice a week, probably more often. And it was a great, great time. My sister, being quite a number, like age-wise, we're only 3 years, 3 months, but grade-wise, I started early and she started a little later because of our birth months. I'm in October and she is in January. So we're like 5 years apart in school. So when I was in 8th grade, she was in 3rd grade. Just as an example, it's like I graduated from high school and she started high school. Maybe that's wrong. That is accurate. Maybe the 3rd and 5th or 8th is wrong. Doesn't matter. But we love the library, loads of reading. And in fact, I was recently saying, I want to go to the library. And it's kind of sad because libraries are not libraries in their traditional sense anymore. And we would rent other things we would rent things other than just books. We would rent VHS. My dad was a huge fan of renting records from the library, because that was a thing. You could rent records. That was in my childhood. And then eventually they started having DVDs. Tapes were not really fun to rent from the library because they'd be like mixed quality. But VHS, we rented a lot of VHS from the library. And then when I was in like 4th through 6th grade, the apartment complex we lived in had a pool. We were fish. I was so dark-skinned from being outside at the pool as often as possible that my neighbor who lived upstairs from me, who was African American, like the inside of our arms was legitimately the same color. Our forearms were basically the same color. I tan really well. I just don't anymore. So very mindful of that. But we would be at the pool like fish style. We would be completely immersed in the pool as long as was humanly possible. And that pool in particular at Tanglewood Terrace in Escondido, we were dominating. Like the second it was open, we were out there. And of course we could only go if, our mom was available, and she worked in sales. So her schedule was a little variable. So there were lots of times we could go to the pool during the day because my mom was working a night shift or something. When we were younger, we did a lot of little adventure things like treasure hunts. So my mom would like make a list of things we needed to find. And so it wouldn't necessarily be something tangible, specific, but like find in our environment. So making us aware of our environment. And then we would do nature walks where we'd have to find a green leaf and a yellow flower, and we would collect them and maybe do an art project with it when we got home. So there were lots of those. Again, free is key here. And then we would go and do little picnics with our stuffed animals or our dolls. So we'd bring our blanket and we would have our lunch or snack, whatever it was. And we'd set up our dolls to have the whole situation with that, and have them enjoy our little picnic party as well. And so that was always a really fun time. And I would do that with my kids as well, the little picnics in the park, which was just a nice way to like pass the day. We got our little adventure, we got some sun time. My sister would generally be tired out by the time we were done and be ready to take a nap. Naps were huge for summer, obviously. Like, why not take advantage? Cooking and baking was a for real all the time thing. Besides our very odd summer food, we would cook and bake while we were home alone. So I was talking to my sister about it earlier today, and I said, yeah, do you remember like we would make a cake or cookies or brownies or something while mom was at work? She's like, well, how old were you? And I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11. She goes, and you were responsible for me all day. Yeah. It's not an exaggeration. That's literally how life was. And it wasn't a thing. And I'm using the oven and my mom's not home. And like, if we were going to make mac and cheese or pasta or something, I would just make it and it was fine. I knew how to do that. And so one of the things, like one of my favorite ones that I made, we went to Intamin's, or there was an Intamin's, I don't even think that's the right word for it. I'm trying to think it was a bakery outlet. And so you could get Intamin's things, like all of the different pastries. And then they also had like the Boboli pizzas and bread and whatever. We went there all the time. And so we would always have one of those kind of treat things in the house, and not on the normal list, but we did have at one point this pound cake, an Intamin's pound cake. And I saw it on the counter and I was like, oh, that looks good, but maybe I could do something more with it. I think I was 10 or 11 because I remember what house it was at. So maybe 11 at the oldest. And so I decided I was going to make a sweet reduction to go over the top of it. So I put butter and sugar, some vanilla extract, and then I used my mom's amaretto, the alcohol. I made an amaretto reduction. The sweet amaretto reduction, poked holes in the top of the cake with skewers, and then poured it over the top and put it in the refrigerator so it would just kind of solidify and set up. And we tried a bite of it, and I would say like the majority of the alcohol reduced off, because I did bring it up to a boil to burn off the alcohol, and I knew to do that. I got to be honest, it's crazy that I knew to do that. So weird. But the thought of my kids doing some of this stuff just like is what makes me laugh, because under no circumstances, okay, I don't have alcohol in my house, but still, not even that, but like the knowing how to do a reduction. I mean, my son's pretty savvy with cooking, and my oldest really loved to bake, and my middle daughter got into baking and cooking ish. It's not like her favorite thing to do, but this was like really, really young. And so it's just kind of funny to think that this was an allowable activity. So my mom came home and she was like, well, so what were you guys up to today? And so I was telling her, oh, I fancied up the pound cake. Well, what did you do? I said, well, try it first. And so she's thinking I used almond extract. And I said, oh, I used your amaretto. She tastes it again and she goes, okay, well, I don't want you guys to eat too much of this, okay? So like, I'm sure in the back of her head, she's like, good grief, she's using alcohol, but she didn't respond that way. It was more like, all right, well, maybe just like a small piece for you guys, instead of getting doped up on amaretto in the middle of your summer day. Whoops. But then we would cook other, like I said, other random things, make our own little strange concoctions for lunch. We were huge on making boboli pizzas. That was like a regular thing, again, from the bakery outlet. We'd make our personal pizzas. We did a lot of that during the summer. And then, summer days were different than the things we would do in summer nights. When I was older, though, in like high school, I spent a lot of my summer days at the beach with friends, and we would go, primarily we would go into Carlsbad to Terramar, Tamarack, and just spend the whole day at the beach until, you're just absolutely gassed from the heat and sun exposure. And, the water only does so much to offset that, and you feel like you could sleep for the next 2 days and then get up in the morning and repeat. It was great. But also when I was in high school, like we would go out, throughout most of high school, during the summers, my sister and I would get dropped off at our family friend's house, the Scheibels, and we would be out there. We would be at their house, and it was their 5 kids, and then my sister and I, and they always kind of had like an open house situation where everybody would just end up over there in the neighborhood. And I don't know how they did not just go completely broke with as many children were eating from their house. I don't suspect my parents were giving them money towards our consumption. Like, we used to warm up a can of refried beans, add cheese to the top, warm up tortillas, flour tortillas, and then we would just like pinch off a little bit of the beans, kind of like use them almost like chips and dip, but not exactly, just using the tortilla to pinch off a little bit. We would have tortillas with peanut butter, like warm the tortilla, put some peanut butter on it. Tortillas were really kind of like survival staple. Cup of noodle soup, lived off of that. But we would do all of this like in the summer, just like surviving off of whatever was randomly available at the Scheibels house. Sometimes we would make like slushies using the margarita mix, like the no alcohol added, but like it's just that tart sour mix, add a bunch of ice and water to it to dilute it a little bit, and we'd have those as like slushies. The stuff, it's like, it's pretty funny. At night though, we would go out and play ditch, which is like hide and seek and tag, but in the dark. And we would do that in their neighborhood. They had like this perfect, it's like a whole cul-de-sac situation, but like the entire neighborhood was encapsulated in this roundabout, if you will, a round option with all the houses on the outside, and then a little smattering of houses on the inside with a huge park. And so we would go out and play ditch in the neighborhood, and it was such a good time. And as I was mentioning it to my sister, she's like, I have no recollection of this. She might have been too young to be playing ditch with us in the park, because we would be out there, summer, it gets dark much later. And so it would be pretty late when we were out there, but we all felt safe to like, run around and be weird in the wee hours. And then later in high school, when, I was staying out later with friends and things, we would go to Carlsbad at night and like go to a friend's house, and we'd night surf, like station at a friend's house. And then we'd go down and do night surfing, or just bonfire on the beach. And then, we'd be out until it was curfew point, and then we'd kind of like make our way back into the house or neighborhood. And then, it's 2:00 in the morning and we're riding down the middle of the road because nobody's out there to go to the taco shop, on skateboards, just riding down the middle of the street so that we could go get, and I continued doing that actually after I graduated. It was so much fun. And we weren't doing anything reckless or ridiculous. I mean, we were just on long board skateboards riding down the middle of the road. Nobody was there. And we'd go and get, I'd get a bean, rice, and cheese burrito or 5-roll tacos with cheese and guacamole, and hang out, and then head back and play board games and card games. And I mean, it's pretty benign, honestly, but we had a lot of fun. It was really a good time. And so, like, all those fun summer memories, it does make me wish, or like, we got to do more fun things like that when in adulthood. Like, the summer's not the same when you're an adult. There's like a whole work day of responsibility waiting for you on the other end of your fun day or fun night. And so, it's just like go to bed, wake up, rinse, repeat, go to work, start again, do it again, do it again. But summers as a kid, they were a lot of fun. And so I hope that my kids have enjoyed their summers. Theirs have been a little bit more like planned because I work full time. And so, and I would not leave my kids at home like ever. So the summer I would put them in like the City of Surprise. When we moved out here into Arizona, the City of Surprise had a really cool summer kids program, and I put my kids in there until my oldest was too old for that. And then the younger two ended up doing that. And they really enjoyed those times, and then started working from home. So I would have more flexibility, but we didn't do as much like going to the library. We would try and do like some fun thing once a week. Then I put them in YMCA camps. They loved that. So I think this year it's going to be a little less thrilling. We travel more. So there's kind of like breaks in between the travel, and we've got some summer travel. We didn't do as much traveling when I was a kid because, again, we were poor. Those were not options. But this summer we have some trips that we'll be doing, and so that should be an adventure. But anyways, I loved our summers. I thought there were lots of fun. There's a lot of weird stuff that we did that under more direct parental supervision would for sure have not happened. But, summers in the 80s and 90s were different than they are now. And that's okay. I'm glad I had the memories that I had. We didn't have screens for distraction. I didn't play video games. And so there would be the thought of being stuck in the house. I was like, honestly, there was more like punishment, versus now the kids would be begging to like not go out. And it actually has nothing to do with the fact that we live in Phoenix and it's hotter than all get out during the summer here. Like my son in particular, he'd be happy to stay on his video games 90% of the day. So I got to like get him in a routine, and we're going to the gym and we're going to go work out in between things for work, or like starting that early, or, you guys go into the pool. I am going to make him read. My daughter and one of his stepsisters have incentivized him with gifts for reading, which apparently is like a very expensive version of the summer reading program, because he's getting things like a gaming PC and its components, and then a pair of Birkenstocks. So he's leveled up. Congratulations. I got, if we came back to school having read it, proof of reading books, you might get the Pizza Hut personal pan pizza coupon. And that was like the pinnacle of arriving for the summer reading program. Otherwise it was like erasers and a bookmark. But no, not my kid. He's figured out how to negotiate a much higher reward program. he's going to need a really, really well-paying job to keep up with his preferred lifestyle. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this walk down memory lane. Come back again and I'll tell you another story. Thanks.